Guten Tag and willkommen to episode 10 of my Germany 1871 to 1990 vlog. And this time we're fast forwarding to the start of depth topic 3, which looks at the Nazi consolidation of power between 1933 and 1935. Again, like the previous depth topic, this is just a kind of a quick fire, short burst depth topic, looking at that transition from democratic republic of Weimar to Nazi dictatorship. And it just covers those first 3 years of Nazi rule, 1933, 34 and 35. The big questions of this topic, therefore, are change continuity questions where Hitler starts out as Chancellor of a democracy and ends up by 1935 having consolidated the power. So what has changed and how much have things changed? And to what extent is Hitler actually in charge of that shift? We'll talk a little bit about Hitler's style of dictatorship in a subsequent episode. The other question is, how does it happen? The causes of that happening. In what ways, what methods are used in order to consolidate their power. There are other questions, of course. You could look at more specific things. And I would say that on the Nazi depth topic, because the Nazis are such a well-known and so often studied topic, both at GCSE and A-level, it probably is a little bit harder to stand out. And there's maybe the bar is slightly higher in terms of how to impress people with your knowledge and evidence. So do take care with this topic to be really comprehensive in your knowledge. So let's talk a little bit about how the Nazis came to power. Actually, this is before your depth topic starts, but there's several things in there. Hopefully you've kind of come across before, but that help us appreciate the position of Hitler and the Nazis in January 1933. So we rewind back to the start of the Weimar Republic. The start of the Weimar Republic, as we talked about in the last couple of episodes, was quite kind of traumatic, really, in a way, that the SPD and their allies formed the Weimar Constitution, but all around them was chaos. And there were uprisings and coups and attempts to seize power, starting with the Spartacists and rolling on through the next couple of years. Probably the last of those was the Munich Putsch in 1923, and this was the Nazis' attempt in the aftermath of the hyperinflation in the Ruhr and one or two other problems. The Nazis attempted to grab power in Munich, kind of inspired by Mussolini's seizure of power in Rome the previous year, and they hoped to kind of march to Berlin and seize power there too. It all falls apart for them. It really is. It's a non-starter. It doesn't get the backing that it needs. They're not powerful enough, etc., etc. And of course, Hitler famously sent to prison for 9 months, where he writes Mein Kampf. However, the key important point for us here is that after this, Hitler decides that he needs to work on a legal strategy for taking power. He's aware that he doesn't have the breadth of support, perhaps even the depth of support that's required to grab power, and so he needs to work through constitutional channels. With that in mind, when he emerges from prison, they refound the Nazi Party and they stand in elections. And whilst then the Weimar Republic is kind of a bit more peaceful, a bit more stable, through the mid-20s and what's called the golden years of the Weimar Republic, or the Stresemann years sometimes, actually things don't go so well for the Nazis. So in 1928, they stand in elections and they win only 12 votes. And the big turning point in that is, of course, the Wall Street crash and the subsequent economic meltdown in Germany and crisis across the world. That means that in 1930, their election results jump from 12 seats to 107 seats. It's worth noting that actually what happens at this time is that the electorates stop backing those parties that have kind of got them into this mess and start backing those parties who are promising to get them out of that mess with some credibility, because they're not tainted by the problems and the disappointments of the past. And the Communist Party, therefore, also sees its vote almost double from 1928 to 32, but there's no doubt that the Nazi vote increases by much more and much more dramatically than even the Communist vote. So between 1930 and 1932, things get worse. The last sort of democratic Chancellor, Heinrich Brüning, runs into trouble, is unable to solve things, and in May 1932 his government collapses. That is the last government of the Weimar Republic that has control, legitimate control, of the Reichstag. He is replaced as Chancellor by Franz von Papen, a Centre Party politician, but not the leader of the Centre Party. Instead, he's someone who has the confidence of Hindenburg in his ability to be Chancellor. Von Papen doesn't have control of the Reichstag, so he calls an election in July 1932. And in this election, the Nazis achieved their best result in the Weimar Republic. They win 37% of the vote. They become the largest party with 230 seats. In fact, they are 97 seats ahead from the second party, the SPD. And Hitler fully expected to kind of be asked to be Chancellor. But no, von Papen stays on. Not surprisingly, Franz von Papen is unable to control the Reichstag because he doesn't have support in there. He asked Hindenburg again for an election in November 1932, and this time the Nazi vote actually declines a bit to 33%. That's important, drops from 37 to 33%, but they're still the biggest party in the Reichstag. They have 196 seats, and they're still 75 seats ahead of the SPD. Franz von Papen still doesn't have the confidence of the Reichstag. Because of that, he's unable to get policy through the Reichstag, and he is reliant upon Article 48, or Hindenburg's permission to use Article 48, in order to run Germany. Hindenburg has enough of this. He's got people in his ear telling him that Franz von Papen is no good and can't do the job, and so he is sacked. And Kurt von Schleicher, army general, former friend of Franz von Papen, becomes Chancellor. He is then stuck in exactly the same situation, can't solve the economic crisis, hasn't got control of the Reichstag, and also asks Hindenburg for an election. Hindenburg has spotted now that actually this is not going to work, that kind of elitist chancellors imposed upon the political situation are probably not the solution, and he again sacks Kurt von Schleicher. At this point, Franz von Papen comes back and says, oh, you know what would be a great idea is having Hitler as Chancellor. Now hear me out, neither of us like Hitler. Hindenburg has no confidence in Hitler, doesn't like him, doesn't like his party. Franz von Papen doesn't like him either, doesn't like him personally, doesn't like his party, but they recognise that actually Hitler is the only person who could control the Reichstag at this point because he's leader of the largest party, comfortably the largest party. And so Franz von Papen has this idea that he will be Vice-Chancellor to Hitler's Chancellor. And that's the deal that they go ahead with in January 1933. Franz von Papen says, we've hired him. He says, we've boxed him in. He tells a friend of his that in 2 months' time, we'll have pushed Hitler so far into a corner that he'll squeak. This idea that Hitler actually is in quite a weak position when he is made Chancellor. Now, ultimately, of course, this is a massive miscalculation by von Papen and by von Hindenburg. And at the time, actually, it's spotted by General Ludendorff, you might remember from the First World War. He had also actually helped the Nazis a little bit in the Munich Putsch, not very successfully. And he writes to Hindenburg saying, this is a massive mistake. You don't know this guy, I do, and it's going to end in tears. And of course, it turns out that way. But in 1933, remember that Hitler's position is actually very weak. He's in a coalition cabinet. Only 3 out of the 12 members of the cabinet are Nazis. Hitler himself, Wilhelm Frick was the Minister of the Interior, what we would think of as Home Secretary, and Hermann Göring was actually Minister without portfolio. Hermann Göring was also Interior Minister for Prussia, because there's a lot of overlap between the federal and in fact, complete overlap between the federal and Prussian governments at this stage. So, in a significant minority in the cabinet. The other members of the cabinet were sort of supportive, but they were more conservative supporters rather than Nazi supporters. So, von Papen himself, Alfred Hugenberg, the leader of the DNVP. Hitler, of course, had the largest party in the Reichstag, but he didn't have a majority in the Reichstag. So it's going to be difficult for him to get policies, certainly get radical policies through the Reichstag. Hindenburg hires and fires the chancellors, and Hindenburg does not like Hitler, does not have confidence in Hitler. The army and the trade unions are both wary of the Nazis. The economy is unstable, and the political situation is unstable. Hitler's, in fact, the 15th chancellor in 14 years. And, of course, you've got the rising threat of the Communist Party. So Hitler's position in 1933 is one where it's weak and where it's certainly... it would be a surprise if you told people at that stage how things were going to work out politically. And that's why you've got this change continuity question, and even like the factor question about how do things work out? How does he get from this point to being in complete control by 1935? So just the first couple of months we'll look at now, and then the rest of it we'll look at next time. I've already mentioned that, well, in fact, the first thing Hitler does is call an election. He wants to try and get that majority in the Reichstag, and he's confident now that he can do it. He has a bit more control over the propaganda of the country, and largely through Goering's position as Minister of Interior of Prussia, he can also infiltrate into the Prussian police force his own supporters. So 50,000 SA and sort of assorted people are brought into the Prussian police force for this election campaign. This is the start actually of what's called Gleichschalten, which is the merging together, the meshing together of Nazi and state institutions, the kind of Nazification of Germany. In that election campaign, 69 people died in violence over 5 weeks. Actually key in that election campaign, a key turning point, if you like, was the Reichstag fire. Famously, on the 27th of February, the Reichstag burned down, and this has been pinned upon Marinus van der Lubbe, a Dutch communist. We're not really sure if he did it alone or not. Still, historians now lean towards the idea that he did do it on his own. What is key, though, is that the Nazis jump in and take massive advantage of this. Wilhelm Frick drafts the Reichstag fire decrees, takes them to Hindenburg, who signs them off using Article 48, suspends civil liberties, and as a result, 4,000 communists are arrested overnight, 25,000 within the next 3 months, to the extent that they need to open the first concentration camp at Dachau on the 22nd of March to house all these new prisoners. The conspiracy that they sell to the public using propaganda is that this was not the act of one communist, this is part of a plot by communists to seize power. Not only does it help them remove the communists politically, it also encourages industrialists and wealthy elites to support the Nazis, as they are the party that will take down the communists. So the communist threat is made real and significant, and really helps the Nazis in these couple of months. The election results in March. 88% turnout, suspicious. 44% though for the Nazis, so not that majority that they needed. They're still reliant on the DNVP for that. So with the DNVP, they have 52% of their support in the Reichstag. When the time comes to open the Reichstag, they're meeting in an opera house because it's burned down. But the day before, or as the opening of the Reichstag, Hitler organizes this event called the Day of Potsdam. They go to Potsdam to this church. They go to the tomb of Frederick the Great Prussian king. Hindenburg's invited. The Crown Prince, the Kaiser's son, is invited on the 21st of March. And this is a way of Hitler saying, yes, I am the Nazis, and I'm going to bring in new stuff, but I'm deeply aware of the heritage and traditions of Germany, and I will not let you down. I can represent you as well. And he does this deliberately as a sort of propaganda maneuver to sway Hindenburg and the conservative elites into trusting him, into giving him a go. And it works really well. And you might think of this as a miscalculation, but on the other side, the Nazi propaganda is very, very effective here. This, of course, means that 2 days later, they're able to pass the Enabling Act. And this is the first of what we call the pseudo-legal measures, where the communists are banned from Reichstag. Some of them have still avoided arrest, but they're not allowed to turn up. When everybody else turns up, the SA are surrounding the Reichstag, and inside they're blocking all the exits. There are Nazi banners everywhere. This is not like a Reichstag with multiple parties in it. This is a Nazi-dominated sphere. Intimidation is put upon the speakers, even when they are speaking in the debate. Otto Wels, the SPD leader, tries to speak out in favour of democracy and is shouted down. The Centre Party are intimidated and bullied into voting for the Enabling Act. They're given some assurances that the Nazis will be nice to the Catholic Church and will allow, and there'll be no repeat of the culture camp, if you like. And as a result, the Centre Party and, of course, the DNVP, some smaller parties, vote in favour of the Enabling Act, and it passes by 444 votes to 94. With a 2/3 majority, this means that the constitution can be changed without the Reichsrat having any veto over this. And that's very important to you. And the Enabling Act gives Hitler and his government 4 years of dictatorial control. They do not need to, they can pass any law. In fact, they can amend the constitution during that time without bringing that back to the Reichstag. So in these ways, already using pseudo-legal measures, violence, intimidation, propaganda, already taking advantage of the miscalculation of others around them, Hitler and the Nazis within 2 or 3 months are well upon the way to consolidating their power. Next time, we'll look at how that's extended in the next couple of years, and we'll flesh out those factors a bit further. I hope that's useful, and I'll see you then. Bye-bye.